I'm going to be working on repotting a couple of maples today. One of them I've been working with for quite a while, and another one not quite so much. Very different in several ways. One of them is a dwarf with large leaves. One of them's a larger Acer palmatum with somewhat medium to small leaves. So I'll be putting them in some pretty shallow pots, both of them, because I want some shallow root systems. And I'll show you what kind of pots I got and the potting process in this video. Let's get started on my favorite one. So this one back here is a Kiyohime, dwarf Japanese maple. This one's been in this Shosuibon box for a couple of months now. I took it out of a large oval pot. It's more like a forest pot, but it was big enough for the root spread on this, so that's why I had it in that. But since this one's more of a permanent collection tree, it's time for me to get it into a round pot where I can turn it and display any direction that I want. This root base is pretty good. It's got a little bit of gap over here, which I might work out later on in the future, but for right now, basically what I'm going to do is take it out of this box, kind of take off any undergrowing roots from it, from the bottom of it. Maybe figure out how much of this root base is going to be exposed, and make sure I got the tilt just where I want it to be. So it's a pretty easy process since I've worked on this one for a little while. I think around 15 years I've been working on this tree, and it's ready for a decent pot now. I got one from Bonsai Seeker. He was going to list it in the Facebook auction, and I saw a picture ahead of time, and I said, "Ooh, mine!" So I got a hold of that. Let's go see what that looks like. That one's actually a top shelf pot. I keep it up out of the way. I've been kind of selling off the stuff that's down lower and then replacing them and putting the nice stuff up top. I knew I was going to be using this one. Time to get it down. So here's that pot. It's got a little bit of a shiny glaze to it. I kind of prefer that would be matte, but this is what the pot looks like for right this second. I'm going to give it a go as is for at least a year before I decide if I need to do something about a matte finish pot for this tree. It's got kind of a stone color, stone look to it. It's like a green, cream, pistachio, brown edged, really interesting looking glaze on this one. It's got some decent tie-in holes around. Just the one main drain hole. I would prefer a little bit more drainage in this, so what I'm going to do is just take care of that with the soil, make it very free draining. So this is the Bonsai Seeker chop here. I got to be honest, I don't know which way I'm supposed to be holding this. I don't know which way is up because I don't read any other language. Got to work on that though. So it's got really low feet here to come around, and then little drainage spots for the water to come through. It's a pretty nice pot. It's very solid, very chunky. No cracks in it. Ready to go. First thing I'm going to do is get this drainage screen in there. So I just have a piece I had lying around. It's a pretty good fit for that. Now this is just craft mesh is what it's called. You could find this online for really cheap. It's not really super strong, super durable. It's plenty though, just to hold a tiny bit of soil going through this big hole here. So that's what I'm using. See, I just want to make sure I'm clear of all of the important bits here. Now that would be easy enough to leave there, but I always make it a habit to turn my loose ends in because they are a little sharp, and I have gotten them caught on things, and that's not really any fun. Okay, that's ready to go. Now for some wire. I'm going to go ahead and use 4 tie-in wires to go through these holes. I've gotten in the habit of making my tie-ins of bonsai really secure because I want to make sure that they don't have any new roots breaking off of them. It does make it a tight fit to get through these holes to have 2 wires at a time going through, but it's just what I got to do. This is the size of wire that I like to use, and it's pretty consistent, doesn't really break very much. Aluminum wire is not the super strongest stuff in the world. So yeah, I use plenty thick enough wire for it. Now you could definitely use something like a steel wire for this. But I'm fine with this. It's cheap. I have it. It's convenient. So when I have so many trees to take care of and pot during the year, I do want to use something that is affordable and easy. Okay, that's all about there. I'm going to go ahead and add a good amount of drainage to the bottom of this because, like I said, it's only got the 1 drain hole and it's shallow. So I want to make sure that the roots are not sitting right on the the bottom with just a ton of water. I want that to drain really well. I'm going to go at least until I can't see the color of the bottom of the pot here. I am using just standard sifted pumice. This is a coarse pumice that passed through when I was sifting out my just bonsai soil base. This is part of the rocky part of the bonsai soil. I can get it here locally for pretty cheap, so I'm fine with using a bunch of it for this. Now that's just about the right amount for me. I think I can put a little bit of soil and still have room for the roots in here, but let's take a look and see. Now my soil that I'm going to use for this is just bark and pumice this time around. I have mixed it with other things including turfus and red cinders, but this time I'm just going really simple. It's got plenty of drainage. These maples seem to grow really well with shallow roots and bark, and actually the places where I get most of my maples from nowadays, they just pot them in straight bark and they do plenty well. So figure if it does well for my favorite grower, then it probably should do okay for me. And I'll just mound a little bit in the center there. Now I'm looking at a pretty high planting position. So let's open up this pot and see how deep the roots are. I may have to cut off a little bit more underneath this. Okay, here we go. Now this should come out pretty easy because I don't have it tied in and it hasn't grown in this pot for very long. Yeah, plenty easy. Root growth is actually kind of active right now. It's just getting ready to pop these buds open on top, so I really needed to get to this. This was just a filler soil that I put on there, mainly to insulate the roots in case it got cold. It only really got cold maybe once or twice this winter so far. We are just about to head into February, so it is likely that it'll get a little bit more cold again. But I got my greenhouse here to help me out with that. Alright, so I am going to be able to expose quite a bit of the surface, and I've been working the soil down over the years to be able to do that. So I have a pretty shallow root mass in here. I'm not really concerned about being too gentle with the roots. I'm not using a hook, so this technique, even though I'm just kind of jabbing at it, it is rather gentle compared to a root hook, which grabs and rips the roots quite a bit. Hardly any of these roots are really getting damaged in this process, which is cool. I just mainly want them to be straightened out, detangled a little bit, and then I'm going to trim them. I shouldn't have to trim really many thick roots on this because I've been doing that over the years, and as you can see as I'm going around it, as I'm untangling it, basically what I have is a lot of fine roots spreading out from the trunk. Every now and then, like right here, I'm starting to hit a little bit of tangles. I don't really need them detangled all the way to the tips. Like on this side was at the long end, one of the long ends of the oval at least, when I had it planted in that last pot. So I'm going to be cutting off a lot of this to fit it into that round pot. And I like the rounds because I don't like to have my viewing angles restricted by the pot. A round pot allows you to turn the tree whichever way you want, and if you've worked the tree as a no front tree, you're probably going to be happy with whichever side you've wanted. And I have worked this tree that way. I've just never had it in the right pot for that. I've been doing oval and rectangular pots almost the entire time I've been doing bonsai. Only within the last few years have I really tried to start focusing on moving my trees to having no fronts. And let me tell you, it's a game changer. It's a different styling focus that you have to have. Instead of just paying all your attention on one side of the tree, you're really turning the tree quite a bit. Here, let's see how much I need to take off of that. A lot. So this is a very vigorous tree and it can handle quite a bit of this root work. I'm using my not so good scissors anymore. These are actually my root cutting scissors, so I have a separate pair of scissors that I use for the upper parts. I don't really mix my uppers and my lowers. These are really nice roots. I'm really happy with how this is turning out. It looks like I'm cutting off a ton of roots, and well, I am, because this had a bigger pot before. So that is something I'm keeping in mind also, is that going down in pot size. Okay, you can see that's relatively shallow already. I gotta get into a really shallow pot, so I'm gonna be taking off a lot of this underneath soil. Okay, I'm going to move to the hook for this because I need to get a little bit more vigorous with getting this lower stuff off. Most of it's just going to get chopped off anyways. I'm going to try to get down to almost the woody part of the underneath of the trunk here. So if I had not worked on this tree for as many years as I had, underneath here would be a lot of really thick roots. I've been very conscientious about taking off the thick roots. Even this root right here is like the thickest, and you could barely see it in the shot. I'm going to make sure I cut that one really close, because otherwise it will thicken up. So I'm feeling pretty good about the root work I've done so far. I feel like I'm getting it pretty shallow. It's almost the same thing that I did 2 years ago when I repotted this. Now what I'm not quite so sure about is this going to fit into the pot as it is? It's a pretty shallow situation I got going into there. I just want to make sure that the new ends of the roots get plenty of fresh soil. So I'm just taking out all the extra soil in there. It also will allow me to push them into a more flat plane at the end there. There won't be a big lip that I have to figure out how to squash down. Now, looking at it now, I think this was a mixture that might have been a little bit wet for it. The roots are still pretty good, but I had to really watch the water a little bit. It didn't drain quite as well as this mix, I think, will. I'm just rounding this top off so I don't have to mess with the roots to try to fit them in there quite as well. Alright, time to have a look and see where I got it to. That's fitting in there. So the edges are a little bit further away from the pot because this oval ended about right here. It ended just a little bit further in, came out to the sides quite a bit more. So here's where it gets pretty simple for repotting. I'm going to plant it overall centrally in the pot. And I'm not going by the trunk specifically, I'm going by the overall image of the rest of the tree. Let me see if I can get you a good angle for that. Alright, overall the rest of this tree I'm looking at the edges and trying to see where that fits around the pot. The trunk may very well be to one side or another. So I know that I have a large branch here that comes out to the side and spreads a little bit that way. And I've also left these pretty far out, so let's take a look. I'm going to move it that way just a little bit for this angle and then move it to another side. Okay, on this side you can see it comes out quite a bit. Move that way. Okay, I'm liking where it's at already. I think I'm ready to squish this thing in there. So basically I'm just going to press and then check my angle again. Yeah, it's pretty good. Ready to tie that guy in. Now I have plenty of thick roots around this. I do think I'm going to be able to go underneath some of these roots because I have some thick roots underneath the upper roots. Let's see where I can go here. Alright, I'm going to try to get through underneath this. Get underneath those two pretty easily. I think I can get underneath that. Yep. I'm doing that because I want to be able to see as much of these roots without the wires as I possibly can. Oh yeah, that's pretty good there. I'm happy with that. You can barely see the wire underneath here. In fact, from your angle, you can't even see it. So that's awesome. Next one. I'm going to go to the opposite side of that. That way, I had pulled this end down, so I want to just even it out and pull this one down. This one, I'm actually going to go straight up to this root here. Good. So next up, I'm actually going to take this one around to this side. And this is a benefit of having long wires. Benefit of having long wires here is I can use the end of this wire to attach to this wire over here. And go through the same spot over here that I went through for that last wire, I hope. Being pretty careful to both hide and secure these things. It's pretty good. So this one I thought I could go under that, but I don't really feel a lot of thick roots. So I'm just going to go right over the top of that one. Okay, last one. Alright, tidying up the wires, and then I only have to add a little soil. Yeah, the wires are decently tidy. I'm going to check to see how secure that is in the pot. All of my recent repots have been super secure, so I'm not really too worried about it. Here's my test. Oh yeah. You could grab it by the trunk and lift it, and it feels really secure. So there is that in there. On here, I'm just going to take a look and see if I need to take off any roots. Some of them are a little bit weirdly placed. It's going to have a kind of high planted look in here, kind of a bit of a tree on a hill. I think that'll look pretty neat in this pot. Okay, before I add the soil, I'm just going to go through and take a second look at the roots, see if I'm missing anything. I know when I water this in, a lot of those little crumbs are going to fall off. So I just want to take a look and see what's underneath before I get to that point. Okay, soil ready. Again, I hardly have to put any soil in here, so that's pretty good. So that was about 1 scoop of soil. So I have, I think, 1 scoop of soil underneath, 1 scoop of soil on the sides, and that's not a lot of soil in here, but it's got really shallow roots that are very functional. Almost all the fine roots that do all the legwork, the feeder roots. I don't really need to jam this stuff in too much because that was part of the reason for actually making the sides so thin, so they can just kind of press this down onto the edges of the roots. Okay, I'll just dust off a little bit of this. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do is have all this nice fresh soil just fall all off of it. So what I like to do is add a temporary moss coating on it, which is going to go all around the edge here. I just find my moss locally. I got tons of it lying around, and I'm just going to take the pieces and kind of flatten them out a little bit. I don't really want big mounds of moss. So this is basically just enough to hold the lightweight pumice and bark in place so it doesn't all fall off from watering. It's basically a function more than a pretty look. You may have seen this done with some long fibered moss before. I think that's typical for potting, and a lot of times that moss is dry because they don't actually want it to grow, they just want it to stop the water from washing this stuff off so quick. I do have long fibered moss around here also, but I have I don't really like it so much on here because it does this moss will grow on here, and I don't really want the super long stuff on here because it's gonna start to really get shaggy on here. This really flat moss like I have here, this is super easy to peel off whenever I want to. Drawback is the birds also think it's super easy to peel off while they're looking for bugs and grubs. So yeah, there's trade-offs. But it's free. It's just lying around here in my neighborhood. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is spots where I can see wire, like this spot right here, going to get just a little bit of strategic mossing. That's still a little bit close to the thick root there, but I don't really like to see the wires if I don't have to. And I just had a couple of spots where that is. Okay, so that is mossed in. I just even out the sides so I can see the nice rim of that nice pot. Also, this helps to push the moss into place a little bit better, squashes it into the form of the soil there at the top, and keeps quite so much soil from washing off. Since that's a function of this moss, that's the reason why I have it on here. Seems like an important step to me. Alright, so before I go ahead and wash this off, clean it up, get it all watered in, just showing you what it looks like in a round pot. This is the first time I've had it in a round pot, and I'm pretty excited because now I can turn the thing around. Right, here's the next one I'm going to do. Regular old Japanese maple. Now this one's a little bit further along in some ways in that it has very aged areas here of the trunk, but not so far along in that the canopy is not so developed. Also, the roots are not so developed. In fact, this has only been, I think I've only worked this for maybe 3 years. I haven't had it very long. It is an old tree. It was neglected in a nursery for who knows how long. This is actually from my favorite nursery down in Sumner, Washington. It's called Higashi Nursery. So this, I believe, is just a standard Acer palmatum. It wasn't marked at all. It was actually just overgrown by blackberries. Happened to still be alive, and it's really interesting. I like it. So I'm going to get this thing in an interesting pot also. It's kind of a scarred and broken trunk. Actually had a broken pot, which I've recently used a kintsugi technique to fix up. Let me show you that. This pot right here. So this pot I actually broke intentionally on YouTube, and intending to do something with it. I was going to use two crescents to make to fit together something that would be a full composition of separate pieces. That didn't work out. So I went and used epoxy and basically gold glitter to repair it. And you can see it's kind of a gold color, which I'm not super fond of gold, but there it is. It is a pretty decent repair. It came to me broken, and it's probably in better shape now than it was. I mean, so far it has a ring back, which means that the sound's resonating without being stopped at a break. So that epoxy really does do a good repair. I'm going to use this, I think, for this tree. It's pretty expansive, very flat on the bottom and wide. So it's actually, maybe it'll be slightly longer than this is, so I'm not going to have to comb out much roots. And it's round instead of an oval. Definitely a different look than this. This is more of a traditional sort of like the cream glazed color that you see so often in maples. And this is just a little different, that I think goes pretty well with the brokenness of the tree. So again, we start with drainage screen. And since I found out that this drainage screen is super cheap to get, I actually really don't skimp with it as much as I used to. I used to really try to make the most out of my sheets, and I would go a little bit too close for comfort for the screens that I would put in. But I mean, this is roughly $1 for a whole sheet of this stuff. It's actually pretty affordable. Now this, when I got it, it just had the center hole for drainage, which is okay size, I guess. I would like more drainage. But it had no tie-in holes. I was going to have to figure out how to do that. And these feet are so shallow that it was going to be really difficult for me to tie in from that position, because when I sit it down, I mean, I can barely get wire past under there. I'm going to have to use a pretty thin wire to attach my drainage screen. So what I did is I went ahead and I added 4 sections, 4 sets of holes. So I have enough to tie it in as much as I want to tie it in. So I am using a thin wire for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons being that I can't really pass a thick wire underneath this pot without it rocking. And the other reason is I have tie-in wires, so I don't need anything strong to attach wires to here. All I need to do is be able to keep this drainage screen down in position. I'm going through a lot of wire lately because I'm repotting quite a bit. And I actually I was able to get a bunch of wire for pretty cheap by going through online straight from the Middle Kingdom, China. So yeah, this is like most wire that you would buy at a bonsai store. This is from China. That's where most of it comes from. I just went directly to the source and got it from there. It is a pretty durable pot. I just knocked this other pot and there's no chips anywhere. Now this other pot, that actually had frost damage. That is a cracked pot. On the back side of it right here, there is a pretty big crack in it. So that pot's actually just going to get, I'm not sure. I don't really have a use for oval pots anymore because I'm going to all rounds. So that pot, I'm probably not going to have much use for it. I might make it as a training pot for something. It's worked okay for a training pot for this, so why not something else? Okay, good drainage course going down. Now normally I would go just enough to cover where I can't see the pot color, but mainly what I want is mainly in the center is where I'm going to put this, because this is so shallow inside, I don't really have room to put extra layers of soil in here. So starting with that, and then the bonsai soil, which is basically half and half pumice and bark again. And in the center here, I've kind of just done a little mound of soil. Okay, I'll set that aside for now. Let's see what this looks like. Got some tie-in wires. So this was not completely full of roots in there. It's not really great roots. I'm going to have to get real creative with the tie-ins on this, I think. Looks like I used a soil that did make new roots. I had made some big trunk chops on this, or big root chops on it, but not a ton of root activity just yet. Got some pretty weird roots in this thing here. So I'm not sure how shallow I can go on this. This is going to be exposed a little bit. Roots are going to be kind of out a little bit more than they were before, I think. I'm going to have to mound the soil up a little bit on this one. This has just a little bit of remnants of the nursery soil that was in the nursery pot. Barely a little bit way in there. That was mostly almost 100% bark that they had it in. Yeah, so these thick roots, like this one right here, completely long roots that went out of the pot into the ground, and now it's actually got new roots coming out of those. So I'm trying to be real careful with those. Ones like this big thick one here, see that the cut was right here, and all around it is new root activity. So that's the thing. I've repotted this. I think this might be my third repotting since I've gotten it. So I got it right away when I got it. Sorry, I repotted it right away when I got it. It was a good time for that. And then I did it one more time a couple of years ago. And then now I'm doing it now. There is some nice new white roots out here. Some new root activity. The growing tips of some of these ones, like this one right here, not sure you can see that, but you can see where the new root comes out. So I'm going to be able to keep everything that's on here. I don't need to cut anything. So this one, I am going to have wires showing on this. Where I need to tie down, like on this thick root right here, I'm going to have to just pad the wire and go over that, because I don't really have a lot of great root activity. What I really want is roots that go all the way around this, and I don't have that. Now it's time to get this thing in here. I thought this would be enough of a mound, but I am going to add a little bit bigger mound because I don't have a lot going on there. Alright, now I'll figure out where in the pot I want it. I would like this to be almost central. The canopy, I think, is going to stick out one side or another, and that's okay with me in this case because this is not a broad spreading tree. This is just a very different tree. I don't want it to be super symmetrical. I want it to look pretty weird. Yeah, that's roughly centered. Squish this thing in carefully. Alright, now once you get this thing tied in, let's see how I can do with the wires that I got. Went ahead and put some cushioning over this position here. I'm using cushioning on this because maples, when they're growing strong, they tend to really scar really fast. I wanted to have scars that look like they happen in nature, not scars that look like they happen by wire. I already have a little bit of wire scarring on the branches I need to deal with, so I don't really want to add to that more. So at this point, I don't have a lot of super amazing roots that are making a nice root flare on this. Really what I'm trying to do is both keep it down in place and also protect these really fine roots that I'm starting to have coming out of weird spots. Arranging them in a place where I'm going to like them down the line, so not really overlapping each other all that much. Mainly just making interesting root splays. Okay, this is kind of precarious, so I'm going to tighten that up just a little bit. Alright, definitely not the prettiest wire job that I've ever done, but it's pretty stable. Let me do the check here, lifted by the trunk. That's good. This is a light enough pot where I can do that sort of lift to test it. You know, if this was a heavy pot, that would not be something I would be doing. Cover in the soil. I'm going to start up here at the trunk because I am going to want some more roots up there by the trunk. So I am going to provide the environment for the roots with the bonsai soil, and I'm also going to be planting almost fully mossed around this because I have quite a bit more roots I need to grow out of this. As a bonus, I'm actually covering up most of this wire work, so yay. Okay, now for some moss, and this moss, like I said, I'm going to be going pretty much all the way around with this moss. And I'm not really too particular on what type of moss it is. This is going to be very patchworky type of moss. But I'm going to go as full as I can with the coverage. For a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that moss really encourages surface roots, and I really do want good roots right underneath this soil surface. Another reason is the moss will keep this soil from washing away. It's very light soil, and it's in a mound. It's going to, by gravity and water pressure, is going to want to try to sink and slough. And that would all come off of there if it didn't have some sort of way to keep it on. Moss is excellent for keeping it on. As this grows, the moss will have really great conditions for growing. And the moss is really going to make just a carpet. It's not going to look so much like a, I don't know, what does this look like? Patchwork sort of thing. This moss was just collected today. It is full of moisture. I think if I do this kintsugi technique again, I'm probably going to go for a different color because I don't really care for that gold color. Maybe a rose gold could be interesting on the right pot. I have a bluish pot that I was going to use for it, and that rose gold could look pretty neat against that kind of pale blue of that pot. I also got some supplies to do more of a silver color, which I prefer much more to the yellow of the gold. This is completely random, this mossing. All I'm really doing is just covering all the way. It's kind of fun though, it's like putting a puzzle together. Benefit of this compared to a puzzle is that if the puzzle isn't fitting right, you gotta just make it work right. You can't do different shapes than what the puzzle will let you. But with moss, you can rip a piece if you need to, or you can squash it into place, or you can just add another piece. So it's one of the more fun puzzles, I guess. I'm liking the differences in some of this moss. Some of it's a little bit darker. In fact, this piece I just put on is about a half and half piece, which is cool. Some of the other pieces are big pieces or small pieces. Some of them have the star moss. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but that's a neat looking moss with they look like little stars, the little leaves that it has. Yeah, I have quite a bit of it that I'm putting onto this side. And again, I'm not really trying to go in any certain order. I'm just putting moss on here. Now, if you want to see something that has a whole bunch of moss, I do have something special on my website that you can see. It's called the Be Inspired channel. And it's pretty much inspired by my YouTube time and also seeing a need to do some other things with bonsai. So I have a really cool mossed forest, which is a little different take on the forest. The forest planting, people usually do all of the plants in like a long pot. They call it a forest style pot. And in that they have the trees placed in a certain way so that it looks like the image of a forest usually from a distance. You can do it kind of close up, but it's usually a distant view of a forest. The one that I did is very much a close-up view, and in order to make it happen the way that I wanted to do it, I had a really different way of planting the trees. So that's something that you can see on my website. It's through the Be Inspired channel, and that's on bonsaiecko.com. For right now, there's an introductory rate, which is pretty amazing. At least I think it's amazing. It'll get you in to see the videos. I'm going to be uploading to YouTube once a week, and also at least once a week, sometimes more than once a week, I'll be adding to the Be Inspired channel on bonsaiecko.com. And on there, it's going to be some of the things that you've come to know from my channel on YouTube, but some other things that possibly you haven't seen before in the world of bonsai. And a lot more of my perspective of why I do things for bonsai, some of the special projects I've had going on, some different learning techniques. I might revisit kintsugi and put some better instructions on there. I wanted to do something that honestly I have a little more control over. YouTube is great and it draws in the crowds. The thing with YouTube is I have no control over if they decide that they want to not show my videos anymore. Now I'm not feeling like I'm in any danger of that, but you never know. YouTube is not my company. So on my own website I have control over what I put on there and for how long, all of that sort of stuff that is not a possibility on YouTube. So in addition to that, it's going to be a place where you can find most likely a blog at some point that's probably going to be connected to the Be Inspired channel. Actually, I am still learning how to make a website, and it's a fun challenge, but it doesn't come naturally. I've never made a website before, so it's all learning to me. But if you know what I'm about, I love learning. So I'm going to keep figuring that website out and get it good for y'all. So there's completely mossed. Kind of showing off this tree on a hill. It looks like a small trunk for this big pot. But after a couple of years, what I'm hoping to find when I crack this open is roots spread all around this in all directions. Probably all the way to the edge. Okay, there that is. It is in the pot. There's a little bit of a turn for you. I'll show you that the tree has interest from all sides, and I am still developing the canopy quite a bit. I'm going to let it grow pretty strong this year and get a little crazy. I really like how secure this is in the pot though. For such a shallow pot like this, it really needs to be secure. It doesn't have the volume of soil to keep it from shaking all around. So yeah, that's pretty good. So the last step, I'm just going to water it in, and then I'll put it back up on the rack here for the rest of the winter until spring comes and opens all these lovely little buds. They are getting close. If you head over to bonsaiecho.com and be inspired, you'll also see some initial root work on this Japanese maple. This is a coral bark Japanese maple, and it comes from a place here locally. It's never been treated as bonsai. It's actually in a huge pot right now. So I'm going to be cutting this down and figuring out how it's going to be transitioning into a shallow pot. So this will be a first step for that. Head on over there and check it out.